We will make our King's Landing within the hour." Catelyn turned away from the rails and forced her to smile. "Your Arrowmen have done us well, Captain. Each one of them shall have their silver stag as a token of my gratitude." Captain Morrow Timmit's favored with her, with a half bow. "You are far too generous, my Lady Stark. The honor of carrying a great lady like yourself, all the reward we need. But they'll take the silver anyways." Maori smiled. As you say, he spoke with the common tongue fluently, with only the slightest hint of the tertiary accent. He'd been playing the narrow seas for 30 years, he told her, as oarman, quarterman, and finally captain of himself own trading galleys. The Storm Dancer was his 4th ship and the fastest, and the 2 masters galleys of the 60 oars. He had certainly been the fastest of the ships able in the White Harbour when Catelyn and Sir Roderick Castriel had arrived after their headlong gallop downriver. They tertiary were notorious for their aberrancy, and Sir Roderick had argued for hiring the fishing slopes out of the Three Sisters, where Catelyn had insisted on a galley. It was good as she had. The winds had been against them much of the voyage, but without the gallows oars they'd be still beating their way past the fingers instead of skimming towards the King's Landing and the journey's end. So close, she thought, beneath the lines, line and baggage, and her fingers still throbbing where the dagger had bitten. The pain was her scourge. Catelyn felt. At least she had forgotten. She had not been the last 2 fingers on. She could not bend the last 2 fingers on her left hand, and the others would never again be dexterous. Yet there was a small enough piece to pay for Bran's life. Sir Roderick chose at the moment to appear on the deck. "My God, my good friend, Sir Merrow," said Merrow, through his forked green beard. The Tarshi loved bright colours, even in their facial hair. "It is so fine to see you looking better." "Yes," Sir Roderick agreed. "I haven't wanted to die for almost 2 days now." He bowed to Catelyn. "My lady." He was looking better, the shade thinner than he had been when they sent out from the White Harbour, almost himself again. The strong winds in the Bight and the roughness in the narrow sea had not agreed with him, and he almost gone over the side when the storm seized when they unexpectedly off Dragonstone. Yet somehow he had clung to the rope until 3 of Morrow's men had rescued him and carried him safely below decks. "The captain was just telling me that our voyage is almost at an end," she said. Sir Roderick managed to whirl a smile. So soon. He looked odd without his great white side whiskers, smaller somehow, less fierce, and 10 years old. Yet back on the Bight, it had seemed prudent and summit when a cruiseman razor, after his whiskers had become hopeless, befouled for a 3rd time, while he leaned over the rails and reached over the swirling winds. "I will leave you to discuss your business," Captain Moore said. He bowed and took his leave of them. The galley skimmed the water like a dragonfly, her oars raising and falling in perfect time. Sir Roderick held the rails, looked out over the passing shore. It had not been the most valiant of prospectors. Catelyn touched his arms. "We are here, Sir Roderick, and safely. There is all the true matters." Her hands groped beneath her cloak, her fingers stiff and fumbled. The daggers were still at her side. She found she had to touch it now and then to reassure herself. Now we must reach the King's Masters-at-Arms, and pray he could be trusted. Sir Auron staggered in a vain man, but the honest one. Sir Roderick's hand went down his face and stroked his whiskers to discover once again they were gone. He looked numbpulse. "He may know the blade, yes, but my lady, the moment we go ashore we are at risk. and there are those who court who will know of you on sight. Catelyn's mouth grew tight. Littlefinger, she murmured. His face swam up before hers, and the boy's face thought he was a boy no longer. His father had died several years before, so he was Lord Bellish now, yet still they called him Littlefinger. Her brother Edmure had been giving him that name long ago at Riverrun. His family's modest holdings were on the smallest of the fingers, and Petrie had been slight and the short of his age. Sir Roderick cleared his throat. Lord Bellish once. His lad trailed off certainly in search of a polite word. Catelyn was past delicacy. He was my father's ward. We grew up together in Riverrun. I thought of him as a brother, but his feelings were more than brotherly. When it was announced that I was to wed Brandon Stark, Petrie gave a challenge for the right of my hand. It was madness. Brandon was 20 years. Petrie, scarcely 15. I had begun Brandon to spare Petrie's life when he let him off with a scar. Afterward my father went to send him away. I had not seen him since. She lifted her face to the spray, as a brisk wind could blow the memories away. He wrote to me at Riverrun before Brandon was killed, but I burned the letter unread. By then I knew that Ned would marry me in his brother's place. Sir Roderick's fingers fumbled once for non-existent whiskers. Littlefinger sits on the small council now. I knew he would rise high. Catelyn said, He was always clever, and even as a boy, but it was one thing to be clever and another to be wise. I wondered what the years had done to him. High overhead, far eyes sung out from the ringing Captain Marrow came scrambling across the deck, giving orders, and all around them, Storm Dancer burst into a frantic activities as King's Landing slid on into a view atop in its 3 high hills. 300 years ago, Catelyn knew, these heights had been covered with forest, and only a handful of fisherfolk had lived in the north. So Blackwater rushed where the deep, swift rivers flowed into the sea. Then Ageron the Conqueror had sailed from Dragonstone. It was here that his army put ashore, and there on the highest hill he built his first crude redoubt of wood and earth. Now the city covered ashore as far as Catelyn could see. Manors and arbours and galleries, Brookstone House and Tibbard Inns were mere chance stalls, taverns and graveyards and brothels all piled on one another. So you hear the clamour of the fish market even at the distance. Between the buildings were broad roads lined with trees and wondrous crook-back streets, and alleys so narrow that 2 men could not walk abreast. Vesina Hill was crowned to be the great sept of Ballery, with its several crystals shone. Across the city of hills, Randary stood, the blackened walls and the dragon pit, its huge dome collapsing into ruins. Its bronze doors closed now for century. The street of the sisters ran between them, straight and as arrow, and the city walls rose in the distance, high and strong. 100 quays lined in the waterfront, and the harbour was crowded with ships. Deep water fishing boats and river runners came and went. Ferry men pulled back and forth across the Blackwater rush. Trailing galleys unloaded goods from Bravos and Pentos and Lins. Catelyn spied the Queen's Orient barrage, tied up beside the fat-bellied waller of the port of Ibion, its hull black with tar, while upriver a dozen lean golden warships rusted in their cabins, sails furled in cruel iron, ramps lapping the water, and above it all, frowning down the Aegon's high hill, was the Red Keep. Even huge drums towered, crowded with the iron ramparts and the immense grim Barbican. Vaulted halls and covered bridges, barracks and dungeons, and galleries and massive curtain walls, stubbed with archers' nests, all flashing of pale dragon redstone. Hagon the Conqueror had commanded it built. His son Megrar the Cruel had seen it complete. Afterwards he had taken board on it. Only the blood of a dragon would ever know the secrets of the fortress of the dragon lords had put, he vowed. Yet now the ballad flew from its battlements where golden notch black, and where the three-headed dragon had once breathed fire, now pranced and staggered crowned stag of the house of Bathron. The High Master Swan's ship of the Summer Isles was beaten out for the port. Its white sails hung with wind, and the storm dancers moved past it, pulling steadily for shore. "My lady," Sir Roderick said, "I have thought of how best to proceed while I lay abed. You must not either enter the castle. I will go in as your steed to bring Sir Aaron to you in a safe place." She studied the old knight with gallery, drew near to a prior. Moreover was much shouting in the vulgar Valoran of the free cities. You would be much at risk as I would. Sir Roderick smiled. "I think not. I look in bad reflection in the water and scarcely recognize myself. My mother was the last person to see me without whiskers, and she is 40 years dead. I believe I am safe enough, my lady." Morrow bellowed as command, as 160 oars lifted from the rivers, and then revised the backwater. The galley slowed. Another shout. The oars slid back and inside the hull as they thumped against the dock. Torshi seemed leaped down the tide aside, to tie up aside. Morrow came up bustling, all smiles. "King Landy, my lady, as you did command. Never has the ship made swifter and surer passage. You will need assistance to carry your things to the castle." "We shall not be going to the castle. Perhaps you can suggest an inn, some place clean and comfortable, and not too far from the river." The Tashi fingered his forked beard. "Just so. I know of several establishments that might suit your needs. Yet first I may be so bold. There is the matter of the second half of the payment we agreed upon, and of course the extra silver you were so kind to promise. 60 stags, I believe it was, for the oarmen," Catelyn reminded him. "Oh, of certainty," said Moore, "though perhaps I should hold it for them until we return to Tosh. For the sake of the wives and the children, if you give them silver here, my lady, they will dice it away and spend it all for the night's pleasure." "There's worse things to spend money on," Sir Roderick put in. "Winter is coming. A man must take his own choices," Catelyn said. "They earn the silver. How they spend it is no concern of mine. As you say, my lady." Moran replied, bowing and smiling. Just to be sure, Catelyn paid the old man herself a stag to each man, and a copper to the 2 men who carried her chest halfway up Verices Hill, to the inn where Moran had suggested. It was a rambling old place of alley. The woman who owned it to the shore, Corn with a wandering eye, who looked him over suspiciously and bit the coin that Catelyn offered her to make sure it was real. Her room was large and airy, through, and Moran swore that her fish stew was the most savory in all the 7 kingdoms. Best of all, she had no interest in their names. "I think it best if you stay away from the common room," Sir Roderick said after they had settled in. "Even in a place like this, no one knows who may be watching." He wore ringmail dagger. And a long sword underneath the dark cloak, with a hood that he could pull over his head. "I will be back before nightfall, Sir Aaron," he promised. "Rest now, my lady." Catelyn was tired. The voyage had been long and fatiguing, and she was no longer as young as she had been. Her windows had opened as the alleys and the rooftops, with a view of the black water beyond. She had watched Sir Roderick set off, striding briskly through the busy streets until I was lost in the crowds, then decided to take his advantage. The bedding was stuffed with straw instead of feathers, but she had no trouble falling asleep. She woke with the pounding at her door. Catelyn sat up sharply outside the window of the rooftop's King's Landing, were red in the light of the settling room. She had slept longer than she intended. The first hammering on the door again, and the voice called out, "Open in the name of the king!" "A moment," she called out. She wrapped herself in the cloak. The dagger was on her bedside table. She snatched it up before she unlatched the heavy wooden door. The men who pushed into the room wore the black ring-mail, golden cloaks of the city watch. Their leader smiled as the dagger in her hand and said, "No need for that, my lady. We're to escort you to the castle." "By whose authority?" she said. She showed her ribbons. Catelyn felt her breath catch her in the throat. The seal was as mocking-bird in grey wax. "Petrie," she said, as so soon something must have happened to Sir Roderick. She looked at the head of the guardsman. "Do you know who I am?" "No, my lady," he said. "My Lord Littlefinger said only to bring you to him and see that you were not mistreated." Catelyn nodded. "You may wait outside while I dress." She bathed her hands in the basin and wrapped them in a clearly lying finger, where thick and awkward as she struggled to lace her bodice and knot a drab brown cloak around her neck. How could Littlefinger know she was here? Sir Roderick would never have told him. He might be, but he was stubborn, and loyal to a fault. Here they too late, and had the Lannisters reached King's Landing before her? No, if that were true, Ned would have been here too. Surely he would have come to her. How? Then she thought, though, Mirio. The tertiary knew who they were and where they were. Damn him! She hoped she had gotten a good price for the information. She had brought a horse for her. The lamps were a bit lit on the streets as they set out, and Catelyn felt the eyes of the city on her as she rode, surrounded by the guard and the golden cloaks. She reached out to the Red Keep. To Portcullis was down, and the great gates sealed for the night, but the castle windows were alive with flickering lights. The guardsmen left their mounts outside the walls to escort her through a narrow postern door, then end up endless steps of the tower. He was alone in the room, seated at the heavily wooden table with an oil lamp beside him as he wrote. When they were unhired from her inside, they sat down at the pen to look at her. "Cat," he said quietly, "why have you brought me here in this fashion?" He rose and gestured briskly to the guards. Leave us. The men departed. "You were not mistreated, I trust," he said after they were gone. "I gave a firm instructions." He noticed her baggage. "Your hands." Catelyn ignored the implied question. "I am not accustomed to being summoned like a servant wench," she said icily. "As a boy you still knew the meaning of courtesy." "I've angered you, my lady. That was never my intent." He looked contrite. The look brought back vivid memories of Catelyn. He had been a sly child, but after his mischiefs, he always looked contrite. It was a gift he had. The years had not changed him much. Beatrix had been a small boy when he had grown into a small man, an inch or two shorter than Catelyn, slender and quick. With the sharp features, she remembered the same laughing green eyes. He had a little pointed chin, bearded now, the threads of the silver in his dark hair. Though he was still shy of 30. They went well with the silver mockingbird that fastened his cloak. Even as a child he had always been loved his silver. "How did you know I was in the city?" she asked. "Lord Varys knows all," Peachy said with a sly smile. "He will be joining us shortly, but I want to see you alone first. It had been long, Cat. How many years?" Catelyn ignored his familiarity. There were more important questions. "So it was the King's spider who found me." The Littlefinger winced. You don't want to call him that. He's very sensitive. Comes of being an inch, I imagine. Nothing happens in the city without Varys knowing. Oftentimes he knows about it before it happens. He has information everywhere. His little birds, he calls them. One of his little birds heard about your visits. Thankfully, Varys came to me first. "Why you?" He shrugged. "Why not me? I'm the master of a coin, the king's own consigliere. Salmi and Lord Renly rode north to meet Robert, and Lord Santis is gone to Dragonstone, leaving only Master Basiliu and me. I was the obvious choice. I was ever a friend of your sister Lisa. Varys knows that. Does Varys know about... Lord Varys knows everything, except why are you here?" He lifted an eyebrow. "Why are you here?" "A wife is allowed to yearn for her husband, and if the mother needs her daughter close, who can tell her no?" Littlefinger laughed. "Oh, very good, my lady. But please don't expect me to believe that. I know you too well." What were the Tully's words again? Her throat was dry. "Family, duty, and honor," she recited stiffly. He did know her well. Too well. "Family, duty, and honor," he echoed. "All of which require you to remain in Winterfell, where our hand left you. No, my lady. Something has happened. This sudden trip of yours bespeaks a certain urgency. I beg of you, let me help. Old sweet friends should never hesitate to rely upon each other." There was a soft knock on the door. "Enter," Littlefinger called out. The man who stepped through the door was plump, perfumed, pondered, and as hairless as an egg. He wore the vest of woven golden threads over the loose gown of purple silk, and on his feet were pointed slippers of a soft velvet. "Lady Stark," he said, taking her hands in both of his, "to see you after so many years is such a joy." His flesh was soft and moist. His breath smelled of lilacs. "Oh, your poor hands! Have you burned yourself, sweet lady? The fingers are so delicate. Our good Master Peltices makes a marvelous salve. I'll send for a jar." Catelyn slid her fingers from his grasp. "Thank you, my lord, but my own Master Luwin had already seen to my hurt." Varys bobbed his head. "It was a grievous sad to hear about your son, and him so young. The gods are cruel." "Oh, that we agree, Lord Varys," she said. The title was but curious due to him. As the council remembered, Varys was allured nothing but the spiderweb master of none but his whispers. The enluge spread of his soft hands. "One more than that, I hope, sweet lady. I have great esteem for your husband, our new hand. I know we do both love King Robert." Yes, she was forced to say. For a century. Never has the king been so beloved as our Robert, quipped Littlefinger. He smiled slightly. "At least in Lord Varys' hearing. Good Lady Varys said with great solitude. There are men in the free cities who would wondrous healing powers. Say only the word, and I will send for your dear Bran. Master Luwin is doing all that he can be done for Bran," she told him. She would not speak of Bran. Not here. Not with these men. She trusted Littlefinger only a little, and Varys not at all. But she cannot let them see her grief. Lord Baelish tells me that I have you to thank for bringing me here. Varys giggled like a little girl. Oh yes, I suppose I am guilty. I hope you forgive me, kind lady. He eased himself down into the seat and put his hands together. I wonder if we might trouble you to show us the dagger. Catelyn Stark stared at the Iluit in stunned belief. He was a spider, she thought wildly, the enchanter or worse. He knew things no one could possibly know, unless... What do you have to do to Sir Roderick? She demanded. Littlefinger's lost. I'd rather like the knight who arrived at the battle without his lance. The dagger we're talking about. Who is Sir Roderick? Sir Roderick Castiel is Master-at-Arms at Winterfell. Varys informed him. I assure you, Lady Stark, nothing has been done to the good knight. I did call you here early this afternoon. He visited with Sir Aron Stagger in the armory, and they talked of a certain dagger. About summit, they left in the castle together, walked in the dreadful hovel where you are staying. They are still here, drinking in the command room, waiting for your return. Sir Roderick was very distressed to find you gone. How could you know that? The whisperings of a little bird, Varys said, smiling. I know things, sweet lady. This is the nature of my service. He struggled. You do have the dagger with you, yes? Catelyn pulled out beneath her cloak and drew it on the table in front of her. Here, perhaps the little bird will whisper the name of the man who belongs to. Varys lifted the knife with exaggerated delicacy and ran his thumb along its edge. Blood welled. He let out a squeal and dropped the dagger back onto the table. Careful, Catelyn told him. It's sharp. Nothing holds an edge like Valyrian steel, Littlefinger said as Varys struck his bleeding thumb and looked at Catelyn with a sullen dimensions. Littlefinger hefted his knife lightly in his hands, testing the grip. He flipped it onto the air and caught... Okay, really? Sorry for that. Yeah, that was me. Sorry. He flipped it into the air, caught it again with his other hand. Such sweet balance. You want to find out the owner of the reason for your visit. You have no need for Sir Aemon for that, my lady. You should have to come to me. And if I had, she said, what would you have told me? I would have told you that there was only one knife that this Knight's Landing. He grasped the blade between his fingers, between his thumb and his forefinger, drew it back over his shoulder, and threw it across the room with a practiced flick of the wrist. It struck the door, burned itself into the oak, quivering. It's mine. Yours? It made no sense. Peter had not been at Winterfell until the tourney of the Prince Joffrey's name. He said, crossing the room to the wrench of the dagger of the wood. I banched Sir Jaime in the jousting along the half-court. Peter's sheepish grin made him look half a boy again. When Loras Tyrell unhorsed him, many of us became trifled poor. Sir Jaime lost 100 golden dragons, the Queen lost an emerald pendant, and I lost my knife. Her Grace had not gotten the emerald back, but the winner kept the rest. Who? Catelyn demanded, her mouth dry with fear. Her fingers ached with remembering pain. The imp, said the Littlefinger, as Lord Varys watched her face. Tyrion Lannister.